The spiders don't necessarily guarantee authenticity, but when you look at the underneath of this and the way it's constructed, there's clearly been a lot of reconstruction of the feet. I mean, the blocking, the way it's done is not even really an attempt to make it look like an old one. But this is quite common because a lot of this worn-out furniture has replaced feet. It's very common. And what I like is this very small size.
Yes.
And the market likes this small size too. So I think when you have a small piece like this of worn-out furniture, which is ostensibly Queen Anne, George I, 1700, 1720, you have to look very, very closely at it. Tell me about the family history before we go any further.
Well, the story in the family is that it came into the family with my grandfather's grandmother, who was the housekeeper at a big house in Staffordshire. And when she married the gardener, she was supposed to have been given this as a wedding present. Now, my grandfather was born in 1854, and it was his grandmother. So that would take it back to about 1820, 30.
At least, yes. This is typical here with the well opening and this arrangement of short drawers. Nicely made, nice quality. Let's just close it again. I want to look a bit more inside it. We've got a... Well, firstly, I mean, it's a well-made drawer.
Yes.
Nice oak showing the medullary rays, very nice and dry, exactly what one would expect from the early 18th century. But when you look a bit more closely, the fineness of the dovetails is not brilliant. It's not as well done as I'd like it to be. And I'm suspicious about this staining on the edge here. The stain is the same along the top as along the side of the dovetails. And I have a suspicion that someone has done that to give that the look of age and wear. Because quite often with drawers, when they're not completely seated in, when the piece of furniture is being used, they stand out, and this part does get air, and the oak does discolour because of the air.
Yes.
Have another look.
A trick of the trade.
A trick of the trade. Now you have to ask yourself, does that look like nearly 300 years of wear?
You think it doesn't?
I don't think it does at all, I'm afraid.
No.
I really don't. When I look at this, I think this is something made at the very earliest, around the turn of this century.
The turn of this century?
Turn of this century, yeah.
Oh.
I think it's... I'm going to have to use a word I don't think I've ever used on a roadshow. I think it's a fake.
Oh. Not a reproduction, a real fake.
I think the person who made this intended for it to look old.
Yes.
Whereas the reproduction pieces of the 1920s and 1930s were always making things which really, to the even vaguely trained eye, don't look old. This you need to look at really quite carefully.
Yes.
And when you start looking at various features, the way the walnut matches up, the sides, the way they join together, the four pieces of walnut, it's not how they did in the Queen Anne period. I think, quite honestly, every time you see a small one like this, 2 foot, 2 foot 6 wide,
yes,
one has to assume it's not old unless you can prove otherwise. I'm afraid. There was an enormous amount of this repro faking at the early part of this century.
Yes.
But it has a value. I can see that retailing for certainly £3,000.
Oh. Oh, well, that's lovely.
And thank you for being brave enough to let me see it.
Oh, well, that's lovely. Now, we've always wanted to know the history of it and whether it was old or not, so, well, that settled it.